Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our summer database series 2025. This is going to be our week 9. This is going to be our last week. Okay. Can you believe that? We have been doing this one a little over, 2 months already. Okay. Almost like the entire summer. Maybe in about 2 or 3 weeks, everybody headed back to school. Okay. So last 2 weeks, what we did was we basically install the GitHub desktop version, and then we'll probably be able to test that with a very simple scenario, having 3 developers. So we probably install the GitHub desktop version on your laptop, and then we also install the 2 other virtual machine, VM machine, on the VirtualBox. Okay, so remember, in order for you to sort of like have the virtual machine, you have to install the VirtualBox because the virtual machine sits inside on your VirtualBox, which is sort of like installed on top of your computer laptops. Okay, so you know what? We're done with the database. We probably talk about GitHub, which is a very common, online tools that the community of developers worldwide use to share code, to collaborate, coding, and all this kind of stuff. And remember, you know, GitHub is basically it's kind of like Google Drive for developers, specifically designed so that people can store their file, their code file, okay? And it's allow people to collaborate and work on the same project simultaneously. It doesn't matter exactly where they at in different region, different languages. They all can actually contribute something to this world, to this online community. It's kind of like you actually have one master file, and everybody clones, make a copy, duplicate copy, clones copy of that file, and they can make all changes and all that, and then they be able to merge all those changes back to the original master file, right? It's kind of like well, today happened to be a Sunday, and so it's kind of like there's only one truth, right? There's only one Almighty God, right? So that's going to be like the master file, and then everybody clone and get the exact copy of the truth, right? And then over time they basically just added some changes. They added the contents, and and then what they have at that time is going to be a little different from the absolute truth. Only one truth, the absolute truth. There's only one God. So I believe that that's probably how the system of world religion comes about. But yeah, I don't want to get down on that road. I get in trouble. But anyway, that's my perspective about sort of like um, how do I. It's kind of like the analogy of me viewing the world religion compared to this sort of like computer concept, GitHub. Okay, and then last week we also show you how to install the virtual machine. Sort of like you can actually have a virtual machine. This is kind of like just like a physical machine, except that it can be installed on top of your laptops. Okay, and it can has different operating system. It can have the Linux operating system. It can have Mac OS. It can have Windows. It can have Solaris. Okay. So that's the one benefits of a virtual machine, that you can actually run, as many virtual machine on your laptops, on your computer of a different operating system. So you can test, the same feature and how it behave and how it's function across a different OS system. Okay. So we probably pretty much at the end of our summer series, and since we already have our virtual machine installed, and presumably maybe your Linux system installed. Okay, so let's write our very first program. Learn sort of like write our very first program in Linux system. Okay. So let me actually log into. Remember, Kali Linux is actually one of the virtual machines I have installed. Okay, this is I have 2 other machines, a virtual machine installed. One is Kali Linux, and the other one is Ubuntu, and they both Linux based operating system. Okay, and the one that I have running is Kali Linux. So let me log into it, and let's actually just write our first program together. Okay. Okay, so what you see is actually the screen of my terminals of a virtual machine, running on the Linux-based system. Okay, so let's try to actually make it a little bigger. Okay, so I'm actually Control RT. That's gonna pop up my terminals. I'm gonna do ls, which is a command, Linux command to list all the file. Okay, all the folder, all the directories, folders and file. Let's go into week 5, city. All right. Let's say that we're gonna write our first program, and I'm gonna use a code editor, Nano. You can use other editor like Vim, Vim. I use Nano because I don't know. I kind of like the Nano's code editor. It's actually give me some feature that I interested in, like colorful. They color different color code for different types of things. So I like that. Nano. Let's name our file maybe our first program. Okay. This program is actually is a bash script, right? It's a shell script. Okay, and then all the bash shell script is going to be ended with .sh file. So I basically going to use, I'm going to open up the very first, the bash file, shell script file, name first program. I'm going to use the code editor, Nano. So I'm going to do this one, Nano, and then the file name. Okay, so now you can actually write. Let's say we're going to do something very simple, just like any other programming language. When you try to learn how to code, you're going to write, you just try to bring out something. We're not going to do anything fancy, anything hard, difficult, complicated. Just try to bring out something, okay? Bring out a message, okay? All the programming languages, they probably have similar concept, though the syntax might be different, but a similar concept, okay? Let's say they are, to write the bash shell script, you started out with this line, pound, exclamation part, /bin, /bash. Why it is the case, I don't know. You just have to sort of like have that. So maybe the compiler, when they read that line, they know, oh, it is a shell script. It's going to be a bash script. So they're going to run based on that. Okay? And then you're going to write the first one, to print it out, a message, let's say echo. It's just the reserved keyword to bring out something. Say hello world. This is a beautiful, great day. This is a great fun day. I'm gonna get a free coffee later, right? Food. Okay. So whatever you want to print it out, you basically just sort of like put them in the double quotation mark, okay? And that's right there is one of the reasons that I like about Nano code editor, because it's actually have a different color coded for the string that you want to print it out, and you use the reserved keyword echo. Echo basically just print, okay? And then you just save and execute this file. You save this file, Control X, save it, right? Now, first program. Now you try to execute and run this file. You just say dot / and then the file name. It's going to be our first program. Oh, you know what? It does not have the permission to execute the file. Remember, all this file associated with a set of file permission, okay? So, it's a read, write, and execute. This is actually a script file. It's a code file. So in order for you to execute, to run this file, you must have permission to execute the file. So this one does not have the permission to execute file. Okay, if I run the command ls, it's going to list me all the contents, all the file, the contents of the current directory. Another word for it is the current folder. It's list me all the file, the contents in that folder. But then the thing is, I want to see, when I want to see permission level, I need to sort of like see a detailed view. So I have to sort of like use an option -L, okay, and -A. You see that? This first program, they don't have the execute permission. They have read, write, and no execution, okay? Well, you see that? Okay, this one right here, the first program right here, they have read, write, and then it's blank, which means they don't have execute. Read, write, execute, that's the order. Read, write, and execute, okay? I'm gonna get into it later on. But right now, let me give the permission using the command chmod. First program, right? Okay, I basically just give this file permission to execute. I give the user, whoever the user is, a permission to execute this file, and I'm using the code 741. I'm gonna get into that later. Now, if you take a look at it, if that file does have the permission to execute, is actually going to change into sort of like a light green color, okay? So try to list it again. Now, it's actually have a different color, which means that it has permission. You have a permission to execute file. So let's try to run the file. And the way that you execute the file, the bash shell script file, you say dot / and our first program, okay? There you go. Hello world, this is a great fun day. I'm gonna get a free coffee later and food, okay? So basically, that's what it is, okay? And you don't do anything fancy, but as you get, a little more advanced, as you get more interested in these types of things like coding, in bash file, then you can actually, explore, do more coding on that. But to start it out with, that's how we do it, all right? That's how you write the shell bash script, and that's how you execute those code file. And I'm gonna get into the, remember that's the permissions file. And this is, I'm gonna explain it to you. This is probably one of those common Linux command, ls, right? ls is basically, you just want to list the content of your current folder, the content of your current directories. That's what they call directories, folders, okay? And but then you want to sort of like list in the detail view. So you want to say ls, and then you use the option -L and -A. -L means it's a detailed view. -A option sort of like tell that you include all the file that is hidden, all the hidden file. You also want to list everything in that the content of the file, the content of the folders, the current directories. Okay, now just sort of like pay attention to the very first things right here. Right, they're going to tell you all this file. The first part is sort of like all the file permission associated with that specific file. And then after that, they're going to tell you the size of the file, you know, and then they're going to tell you the date, you know, that the file been created, edited, and then the name of the file. Okay, so this is the one that we just created. It. The first program is actually created, edited on August 10th, which is today at 10:05, right? And then, you know, this one is basically right here. This first part right here is sort of like file permission. But let's try to elaborate, sort of like try to zoom in this very first part right here. Okay, zoom in. Okay, if you really take a look at it, it's going to be like a 10 spaces for character. Okay, 10 spaces for character. Let me 10 spaces for character. Okay, if you take a look at this one here, this part right here, if you zoom it in, right, make it a little bigger, you're gonna see that it's gonna be 10 places, 10 spaces for character. Okay, the first one is actually just tell you, the first one, the first one is just tell you what type of file it is. If it's a regular file, it is a dash, right? But if it is a directory, which means that if it is another folder next it within your current folder, then it's going to be a D, right? Or it's going to be L, which is sort of like Harlix, okay? But the next following 9 spaces is actually very different. Okay, so think of it like you're going to have a group of 3. So the next 9 is going to be a 3 group of 3, right? 3 group of 3. And this 3 digit repeated, you know, second time and the third time. And basically it's just read, write, and execute. They basically just sort of like specify and list you the file permission for each for each person. Let's say that you are a file owner, you created that file, and then the file permission for the group owner, right? And then this one right here, other, where is everybody else. Imagine that, just think of this scenario. Think of this one as, let's say that you live in a family, in a house with, you know, in a family of 10 people together, you know, in the same house, and you created a document. And so you probably have permission, read, write, and execute, right? The head of the household maybe is a different person. Maybe you just give that person, you know, all the permission, read, write, and no execute. And then everybody else living in that household maybe don't get any permission at all. So that's exactly what it is. It's going to be, you know, the next 9 spaces, right? It's kind of like a group, 3 groups of 3. It's going to be either read, write, and execute. R stand for read, right? R is like read. W is like write. And then X is like execute, right? It's kind of like that. Right? Read, execute, and write. That's why when you take a look at this one right here, you see that the first one is for the user, that's you right there. RWX, which means that you probably have permission to read, write, and execute. The second group of 3, you know, if they have the permission, you're going to see the letter R, like read. W and X, you don't see it, which means they don't have permission to write or they don't have permission to execute. So you leave it blank. You leave it, you know, sort of like a dash. Okay? It's like that. But when you want to give file permission, to certain file, then you have to sort of like give sort of like using, you have to give a file permission using a number. It's sort of like octal number. You see what I'm saying? Because think of RWX, those are binary number. Those are just sort of like binary number. Either it's 1 or 0. 0, just leave it blank, okay? So this one right here, you have 111. This line right here, 111, okay? And that is sort of like, think of it as like 3-digit binary number, okay, 111. That means you probably have the first one read, the second one is write, and the third one is execute, okay? And then if you, let's say that this one, next one, you probably have, you don't have a read permission, you don't have the write permission, but you do have permission to execute. So you say X right there, okay? So if you don't have permission to read or write, you leave those corresponding places blank, dash, okay? And then when you try to give permission, you have to give the permission using not a binary number, but it's an octal number, okay? Okay, to explain that one, let me try to tell you this one. Okay, we are very familiar with, you know, the number that, you know, we count. When you count the number, the items, the quantity, when you count in multis. Okay, that is probably not the only number system. It's not the only number system, but that is probably a very common system that everybody uses in the world. It's called a decimal number system. Is in base 10. Okay, so this is the one that we use all the time, but that's probably not the only way. We probably have some other number system. Different number system is just a different way of representing a number. That's all it is, right? Binary is sort of like binary number system is sort of like the primary language that the computer understands is the language. You basically just, it's a different way of representing a number using only 2 digits, 0 and 1, right? So you're gonna express different, you know, it's a different way of expressing as representing a number. Octal is actually in base 8, which means that they're gonna use 8 digit, right? Starting from 0 and end at 7, right? Binary, 2 digit, starting from 0 to 1. So it's not 1, 2, it's 0 to 1, because remember, they start from 0, okay? This decimal or number system is the one that we very common, is actually a 10 digit, but you started out from 0, so that's why 0 to 9. Hexadecimal is actually in base 16. So you started out from 0 to 15, but then starting from 10, you replace them with the letter A, B, C, D, E, F. It's kind of like that, right? Kind of like 0 to 9, and then after that is A has a value of 10, B has a value of 11, C is 12, D 13, E 14, and F 15. Okay, so that's in base 16 because you started out from 0 instead of like 1. Okay, so now when you try to give permission, right now we're only interested in looking at the binary and the octal. Okay, so when you give permission, you have to run the command chmod, but you have to sort of like give one single digit octal number, all right? Because one single digit octal number can be represented by 3-digit binary number, okay? And that's exactly what we have: read, write, and execute. Think of that as like 3-digit binary number, 111. If you have a permission to read, that bit get turned on, that's 1. Otherwise, it's 0. That means you leave it blank or dash, okay? That's why over here, right, the octal number for the binary, the octal 1-digit octal number for the 3-digit binary number, 001 binary number, is actually has a value of 1. Okay, and this one meaning that you have a permission, you don't have permission to read, write, but you have permission to execute, right? It's kind of like that. You have a permission to, you don't have permission to read, write, and execute. And that is basically for the user. And then the next second group of three, that's the permission for the group owner, okay? And then the last third groups of three, that's going to be for everybody else, for the world, for others. And all of them is going to be read, write, execute. That's all it is, right? So that's why you have total of 9-digit binary number. And then when you give a code, to give permission, you have to give in octal number. That's why you replace with 3-digit, right? Because the first digit is actually an octal number represented by this 3-digit here, okay? That's why when I do let's say this one right here, the group owner, the first one right here, take a look at this particular file, countdown. Okay, this is a file because the first one is actually a dash. The next one is the user, they actually have read, write, and execute. The next second group of three, they have read, but they don't have a write permission. That's why they leave it blank. They don't have an execute. And then everybody else, they don't have a read, write permission, but they do have execute permission. Let's try to change this one to, let's make, say chmod 7. 7 is basically, you have to read, write, and execute, okay? It's kind of like this one right here, 7. Read, write, and execute. Let's say you want to give read and write, but not execute. That's going to be 6, right? So 6, 6, 7, 6, 6. Okay, so you want to give read and write for the group owner, 6. You want to give 0. You don't want to give any permission for everybody else to read, to write, or execute. So you say 0. Because that's what it is right here, right? 0 right here, blank, right? No read, no write, no execute, so 7. And then the file name is going to be like a countdown. SH. Okay, and then take a look at it back to see whether it has been changed. Countdown. You see the countdown here? You see that? Now you have the user, the file owner, meaning you have the read, write, and execute. The second groups of 3, you have read, write, but not execute, and then everybody else does not have any permission at all. That's how you read it. So you remember that when you actually run the command to give permission, you're going to give the number in octal numeral system, okay? So that's why you only give 3-digit, right? Because those 3 digits translated into a 9-digit binary number, okay? So remember that. That's it. You know? Let's say that you want to actually do a little better. You want to write some more code. That's our first program. Go back into our first program, Nano. First program, and then you want to count down, okay? You want to count down. Let's say that you want to count down. Given that I give you number 5, you're going to count down 5 all the way to 0, okay? So we do that using what we call in programming languages called loop. Say for I in $0 to $, and then number 1, which is the variable store. So you want to sort of like retrieve and read the number that is actually passed as an argument, as a parameters when you actually execute the file. Okay. Right, 7. Okay, this one right here is basically that, okay, whatever the parameters, whatever the number that you pass in as an argument, parameters, okay, people actually use two word parameters or argument. Argument here is not like fighting argument. It's just like when you execute the file and it requires you to pass on some parameters, you're going to pass on. That value right there get read, it gets stored into a variable number 1. And for you to retrieve the value that's stored in that variable, just reference that, a $sign, and then number 1. Okay, then you're done, you save it. Now try to run it. And you run that bash script file by using /program, hello world. And then you pass a parameters, an argument, let's say number 4, 5, let's say 5. See, they're going to count it 0 all the way to 5. You see that? If you pass on an argument, let's say you pass on, this is an argument, okay? This is not like fighting, it's parameters, you know, some of the book, they actually called it 10. So they're going to count from 0 to 10. Let's say you want to sort of like do 100. Can you count faster than the machine, right? We just write kind of like only about 3 lines of code and see how powerful that is, right? They'd be able to actually do very fast. They can count it from 0 to 100. Let's say you want to count it to 1,000, okay? Let's say 999, right? With only 3 lines of code that we have written so far, take a look at it. They count really fast. Well, take a look at it. They count from 0 to 999, $1,000. Let's do 1999. There you go. Only 3 lines of code. And see how powerful that is? They'd be able to do this stuff, you know, extremely fast. Count it from 0 all the way to 2,000. Okay? So that's actually that's the end of our week 9, which also conclude our summer database projects. Okay, so I hope that you probably like coding so far. You know, I get this idea. I remember just sitting at McDonald's, you know, on the 3rd floor, sipping sort of like a coffee, and down there, there's some people actually fighting and union protests and all this stuff, and I feel like, hey, maybe I just want to give, I entertain this idea. Maybe I can, you know, do something different from what I've been doing, you know, on my English learning channels. I say, hey, maybe I can actually talk about technology, database, and all this stuff. So that's how this idea was given birth, was born out of that scenario. And now, we've probably been doing this one for a little over 2 months now, okay? So then everybody in school, you probably resume back to school, you know, in about 2 or 3 weeks. But for those of you who basically, you know, continue learning, you know, you can actually learn anything, you know, anything, anywhere, you know, as long as you have a laptop, you know, refurbished one, you know, open box. I get mine for like $400. And then you have the internet, you have the city library. You know, I use a lot of public goods provided by city library, places where they provide me free Wi-Fi. I have internet. You'll be able to sort of like get all this stuff. And then remember, the online communities of developer, you know, you can find tons of stuff that is open source, meaning it's free, right? Yeah. Think of, you know, like a financial calculator, a Casio calculator, not the scientific standard one. You know, they probably cost you like about, you know, $20, but a financial calculator where they calculate the interest and all the financial software and all that, you know, install. They're selling that for like $100. You know, a good one, maybe a couple $100. You know, with all this stuff, it's free stuff. you be able to write a program, and you know what, it can be very powerful. It has all the building function of accounting, financial, and you be able to write, whatever the stuff that provided by financial calculator for free, right? Financial calculator costs you like a couple $100. Imagine this one, that be able to tap into all this open source free stuff, and you can write a little program. Just take a look at, a simple program that I just wrote, 3 lines of code, right? It'd be able to actually count it you from 0 to 2,000 so fast, right? Right? Look at this. If you want it 5,000, do it 4,999. They count it like that, right? See that? It's a very powerful stuff. It's very fun. Okay, it's all free, given that you probably have that passion, the willingness to learn. And you know what? It doesn't matter where you are, in the world. Whether or not you're probably like in school or you're not in school. Everybody can learn. That's the cost of learning. A database, just a heart, a passion, and $400 budget. Thank you so much, everybody. And this is conclude our week 9, and it's conclude our summer database series. The project that I set out to do 2-3 months ago, out of, a McDonald's scenario. Okay. And I hope everybody, you're heading back to school, whatever that you're headed back to, you'll be able to accomplish what you set out to do. Okay. And then I'm going to get back into my other stuff. I don't know. I really enjoy doing some video podcasts, sometimes just sort of like I walk and talk, and so I'm get back into my other stuff. And I'm going to, just like you, I'm going to continue learning the stuff that I'm interested in, design, graphic design, technology stuff, and, W3 school. That's how I learned it. Public City Library. That's where I actually learned my first Python program. I just go into a Public City Library, check out some books. Okay? Thank you, everybody. I hope that you actually have a wonderful, times ahead of you, and whatever that you set out to do, you wish to do, you'll be able to do it. Okay? Bye-bye.